Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Microsoft Data and AI South Florida user group. My name is Adriano, your host, and today we have another fantastic presentation where you have an opportunity to learn about some awesome technologies. And before we get started, please let us know, where are you located at? I'm in South Florida, as the name says, but I want to know you. Use the live, make sure you subscribe, use the live chat to enter your location. And what are we talking about today? We will be talking about SQL Server and Azure MI, SQL and Azure SQL DBMI. What is that? So we are going to make a breeze to show you how to migrate from SQL Server to the cloud on Managed Instance. And who's going to make that possible will be Josephine Bush, who is right here with us. And now, without further ado, I bring you Josephine. Welcome, Josephine, to the Microsoft Data and AI South Florida.
Nice. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much for making the time to be here with us. And where are you located at?
I am in Boulder, Colorado.
Awesome. And can you tell a little bit about your how about your current position, how you get there, and what you do?
hmm So yeah, I just started a new job gosh, I think it's I guess almost like 4 months ago now. And my formal title is Principal Database Engineer, but I wear a lot of hats there. So I'm like DBA, Database Engineer, Database Architect, like Data Warehouse Architect. I'm everything. It's just working on everything, a lot of everything there.
Awesome. That sounds very exciting there.
Yeah, it's it's pretty exciting. Maybe somewhat challenging as well, because some of the stuff I've never built a data warehouse before. So thankfully, we have a consultant that we can bring in to help us a little bit. Some of those areas I'm weak on, so I'm just helping more oversee the project and learn as I go as well. But capitalizing on the skills that I do have, like engineering and administration, so I can help out in those areas right away.
All right, great. And so, like, very exciting, never a dull day. So that's
Yeah, exactly.
you know. And so, tell us a bit about your presentation here today.
Yeah, so it's really to try to make it easier for everyone to go from SQL Server to the cloud. So Managed Instance has some like 99% compatibility. So it's if you want to kind of lift and shift, so to speak, your workloads up there, it is one of the easier ways if you want to use a managed solution versus just plopping it up there in a VM.
All right, that's very exciting there. So, are you ready?
I am ready.
Excellent. So, without further ado, I have your slide here showing migrate SQL Server to Azure MI without getting a migraine.
Right. Or
So,
hopefully, hopefully
yes,
I get migraines without migrating. So I have just been blessed like that, I guess. So, so,
I understand. I understand. Before we get started, just 1 second. So,
okay.
folks, during the presentation, if you have any questions, please remember to subscribe, use the live chat to enter your questions. Now, if the presentation has completed, use the comment section to enter your question as well. All right. If you're on a test right now, if it's working, enter your location on the live chat. As you see, Josephine is in Boulder, Colorado. I'm in South Florida. We want to know, where are you located at? So without further ado, it's all you there, Josephine.
I am
Thank
here.
you.
I'm ready. Yep.
All right. And thanks for being here with us.
Yes. Thank you for having me. So here's Mango. Mango has arrived. Okay. Okay. Don't turn off my headset though, because
We are
Mango loves to,
in great company here.
yeah, he loves to come to my presentations. I started leaving the door open because he would sit outside crying and rip the sign down on the door that says I'm in a meeting and in a huff and put that. So anyway, now Mango joins us. So he's pretty. mostly enough. Sometimes he tries to eat my camera, so we'll see how it goes.
All right.
So yeah, it's like cat DBA, he's like my little assistant. So, and you can see his back. Here's his front. There we go. There you go. You're
Oh,
on my
hello,
camera.
hello.
There you are. He's like, yay.
I see you have an
So
assistant.
I know it's like cat assistant. Usually he gets more comments than I do usually when he
Oh,
comes to my
why?
presentations. Yeah, people love Mango, so more than me. I mean, it's not a big surprise why. So
All
anyway,
right.
so I'm me. I've been introduced so kindly already, and I have a lot of DBA experience. That's the lion's share of my experience, and I'm a data platform MVP. And I actually, this is taken from a live project, bits and pieces of this, not the whole thing, from a live project, a series that I did with Manning to map this all out. So that's that Manning thing up in the upper right in the slide here. So that if you want more details, if you want to be guided through and all this, then you could look at those, and there's sales usually a lot of times. So look for a sale on that stuff, and then that will help you some more than today. But this will give you a nice high level overview so that I split it out into kind of 4 things that you would do, right? You would prepare, like maybe analyze, clean up some stuff and create checklist kind of things. And then you would set up your cloud database. In this case, it's managed instance, right? And then that basically you migrate. There's a database migration service in Azure that helps you with that. They actually recently updated, or fairly recently updated that. So it's actually a lot easier than the first or the incarnation that I knew before. And then you want to monitor and audit. That's kind of one I think people forget about at the end. You're like, thankfully that's done. We've migrated, so that's the important part at the end that we don't want to forget. So the beginning parts, the preparing for migration. Now, you need to analyze for sure, because there may be things that you can't move, right? So, but audit too. I like to add audit in there because I like to see what's in use, what may be not in use. I don't know. Maybe I can remove some stuff. I see that you're going to be really part of this thing, aren't you? So, and then maybe I want to clean up some stuff. Maybe I'm not. Depends on how bold I want to get about my migration. We'll talk about that in a sec. And then creating a checklist. So we're going to go through each of these things in turn. So Microsoft has nicely created this data migration assistant tool, free tool you can install, on your local machine, and helps you go through and find anything that's going to impact database functionality, right? So if you're on SQL Server, you would say, okay, I'm going to assess this thing, right? So I name my project Magic Wand Services because I always feel like somebody expects me to have a magic wand to fix database problems. So I just named it that. And then we're going from SQL Server, right? In this case, we're going to Managed Instance. This tool can actually help you with other kinds of different assessments. In fact, you could even migrate with this thing. So I give you a really tiny setup. If you had a really tiny setup, you probably just could like drop off. You don't even have to listen. I mean, not that I'm advocating for that. Just stay on because you want to hear this. But I would never use this tool for migrating in this cases that I'm talking about, like large SQL Server databases, because that would be too difficult. So just so you know, I only use this for assessing. And so first I want to say that it may not warn you of every possible thing that could cause issues, right? So that's why I always say you do this in lower environments first, start to finish, right? I think as DBAs, we know that thing, but I always like to say it that it's not like, oh, one and done in prod and you're all good to go. I mean, it is a good process, but it's not that good. So you definitely want to test it all out, right? So this screenshot here just kind of tells you after you've gone and done that initial configuration, like saying, I want to do an assessment from SQL Server to MI, and then you want to check database compatibility and feature parity. I do both of those. So that way you get both in your results, right? You want to see everything you possibly can to see what might break so that it hopefully doesn't. But this is one thing I'll say to you that it doesn't going to tell you like, this is going to require you to log in a different way, right? There's Active Directory and there's Azure Active Directory. So Managed Instance is going to use Azure Active Directory, not Active Directory. So that's going to be important if you have like applications or users logging into your SQL Server. that's going to change the way they authenticate. So just so you know that. And the DMA, this tool to check, it's not going to warn you about that kind of stuff, because that's just sort of like, oh, yeah, you probably should know that as part of your process. And that's why I say test in the lower environments too. Hopefully you have those and they're comprehensive. I know that can be kind of hit and miss some places. I've experienced that too. So then you get these results. So the top part of the slide shows you the feature parity. So in this case, I actually made something because I find it difficult to find something that going from SQL Server to Managed Instance that it would break. So in this case, a PowerShell job step is not supported. So I actually created that on purpose just so you could see something in the results and they're going to see nothing, right? So, but this kind of things you're going to have to fix, right? You just can't put that up in Managed Instance. So the bottom half of the slide here shows more of the compatibility issues within the databases themselves. So it goes from 151 for whatever version you're on, it'll show you all that compatibility stuff there. In this case, we have this full text search. It's a behavior change. It's not a breaking change. I've never seen anything in the actual breaking changes up here part, right? I haven't really seen anything there. So that's why they say it's some 99% compatibility with between SQL Server and Managed Instance. So it's like really pretty tight. Like you're not going to have a lot of problems up there. And so then I say sort of hit and miss on whether I clean up. So for me with a migration, I'm of two different minds a lot of times. I don't want to migrate stuff that's not being used, but I also don't want to break the migration because I got too fancy trying to clean things up that weren't in use. So I audit all the time. Like auditing is like DBA 101 to me. Like you want to know what's going on. So in SQL Server, all the time, I do DDL and security changes. I want to get a report every day if something's changed. I want to know. So when somebody comes to me, something broken, I don't know, because I wasn't auditing, right? But no, I audit. But for migrations, I might do another audit to see, like, if I think a database is just totally not in use and I don't have to migrate it, great. But like I said, I don't want to break it either. So, you kind of have to do a toss up, like how much cleanup do you want to do? Maybe I just note that doesn't appear to be used, but migrate it anyway. And then when the migration's over, audit some more and be like, okay, yeah, we can really pull that. So main thing with auditing though, I'll warn you, is be careful you don't over audit, because if you got a really busy production server, it's like a fire hose trying to get every single select and all this, everything going on. Forget it. Don't do that. You might as well not audit. So I just like to, carefully tune that out. I have whole presentations on this auditing stuff out in my GitHub, SQL Kitty and GitHub. So you can see like all kinds of tips and tricks about auditing. Anyway, when I prepare, like I said, analyze, audit, maybe I clean up if I'm feeling bold or courageous, but I definitely see, is there something I could clean up maybe after the migration? And then checklist I didn't really cover very much because it's a little more nebulous. It's sort of like whatever you think is good to have on your checklist. And I know that's pretty like not helpful in that sense, but mainly I just put like stuff I'm migrating, stuff I'm not migrating, steps I'm going to take, sort of checklist of that kind of stuff. Just like remember, have a checklist. That's more like what it is there. Anyway, I'll take a break and see if there's a question.
All right, folks, let us know. Use the chat to enter your questions. I know that Josephine here talked about using the DMA, Data Migration Assistant, for assessment. We are able to look at the database compatibility features, and you just talk about also you touch point on the user authentication. Sorry, I'm looking at my notes. I'm watching this presentation, taking notes, folks. And remember, enter your questions. Use the live chat. And let me take a quick look. I do not see any question at this moment. And it's all you there, Josephine. Thank you.
I am here. There's usually not any questions there. I've done this a couple times and Usually no questions yet. So let's see. We'll get some more here, I think, in a bit.
All right.
So we have, now we're going to set up our cloud database. So in this case, like I'm going to start by doing a configuration baseline kind of thing. I'm going to create a managed instance, right? Because I need to have somewhere my stuff's going to go. And then I'm going to migrate server level objects. So I'm going to get the server part. So this is basically like if you are migrating from SQL Server to SQL Server, this is sort of like the server bits, like getting all the server bits set up so it's ready for your databases to go over there. So one thing to note with managed instance, at least last I checked. So I do have a reference resources slide. So with some of references with all this kind of information there, but you can only do managed instance in these types of subscriptions, right? So it's not everything under the sun. I think there is some limitation. So it's pretty comprehensive. So I mean, you may not run into any issues, but you need to know this are the subscriptions that you can use it in. So first, I create this configuration baseline. By the way, this stuff is up in my GitHub, so you don't have to guess what's the rest of the script look like or anything. So I'm giving you some of the bits and pieces here in my GitHub. Again, that's the GitHub is SQL SQL Kitty, right? So SQL Kitty out there. So, and these slides are actually up there as well from some previous. They may be branded a little bit differently, but they're very similar in structure to these. So basically, I just use a SQL query to get some of the trace flag stuff, all kinds of, SP configure type stuff. I want to see everything that's set on my SQL server. So this is run on my SQL server that I want to migrate up to managed instance, right? So that's step one. This is like reality check. What is all set over there? And then one thing very, very important to note about managed instance before we look at the sort of creation, all screenshots, honestly, if I did a demo for you all, it'd be like 4 hours of who knows. It takes a long time for managed instance to create. Right now, there is something coming that may be quicker start. Good. We'd be sitting here a long time if I walk through all this with you, but the slides give you a really good representation of the steps. So this thing is pretty costly. So like I said, last I checked, the pricing I don't think the pricing is probably not going down much. I don't think. So, it's like $1 an hour, depending on your subscription. Could be more, could be less, just so when you try to ramp this thing up, there is not like a free option or anything like that. I think you can do the pay as you go. I think you could use your free credits if you couldn't set one up at your company, but it can get pricey fast. So just so you're aware of that. So it's a basic setup screens here, setting it up is much like if you set up other stuff in Azure. It looks very familiar, like you're picking your resource groups and your subscriptions and naming it and picking your regions and compute and storage, like very similar to how you set up Azure SQL, right? So the Azure SQL database, right? So, and in this case, I would never say just SQL auth, but for the purposes of a project, when you're just testing stuff, you don't need an Active Directory auth. So I bet most people in prod definitely have both. Just so you note that I wouldn't recommend that in a prod situation. This is just if you're, hey, I just want to set one up and test this process out, then you could just use SQL auth. So the one big thing is that there's so many big things. Why do I say one? There's never just one big thing in life. So this requires you to have a dedicated VNet. So if you aren't sure what that means and you work at a company and you actually have like DevOps or networking people dedicated to that, definitely don't set it up without asking them, because you could trash their networking setup policy, whatever they're trying to achieve, right? If you're just in your own subscription, you're like, hey, I feel like trying this out. Not a big deal. It'll set it all up for you and like it'll get it configured fine. But if you're not sure, like I said, you're working with a company, and yeah, definitely want to make sure that you don't step on anybody's toes or anything. So tips for managed instance, right? Like I mentioned earlier, it can take a while to create. There is like a 30-minute create and preview. Last I checked, I didn't see it in my subscription. I was going to say prescription. Oh, that sounds nice, like soothing, like somebody's going to give me a drug to get through all of this. Don't take drugs to get through this, by the way, but it's not available in all of them. Like I said, I didn't see it in mine yet. And then nicely start stop, which is like so important when you have something that costs so much, especially if you're trying to test it. You cannot start and stop without this new thing that was in preview. Like last I checked, again, you just have to destroy it and recreate it. And as you can imagine, if you destroy it and it takes up to 6 hours to create, you're spending a lot of time waiting. So I'm very excited that Microsoft has these coming down through the whole pipeline to managed instance. So for testing, I enabled the public endpoint. I would recommend doing this for production, but if you're just in a testing capacity, you could enable your public endpoint if you don't have like sensitive data as well. Like if you're worried about sensitive data, I wouldn't enable the public endpoint. But if it's a testing thing, right, you could just do that. And in that case, you would have to connect with this special, so whatever you named it, .public, .this, I've started calling it a mini grid because it's like an alphanumeric code that every single managed instance gets. It's like some numbers, letters, mixed. .database.windows.net, which will be familiar to you if you use Azure SQL database because you do the database.windows.net. But you have to use port 3342 for this. So just so you know, this is a little gotcha to connecting to it. Now, if you didn't have the public endpoint enabled, right, you would take public out. But then you'd have to have a different, some kind of private endpoint enabled, something, firewall that allows you to get in to your managed instance. So anyway, those are just some tips for you. So now, at the beginning, remember I said I got my server settings with script. I just use a SQL script to like look for trace flags and SP configure different settings. Right now, I'm not going to actually use that to apply the settings. That was just like, I like always having a reality check, a little something I can refer to just do a little cross check. Now, DBA tools doesn't really need a cross check, by the way. I've used it many times to migrate bunches of like server level stuff. I just pretty much say start DBA migration. I exclude the databases and I let it go. It's a PowerShell module. It's wonderful. If you've never used it, there's a ton of stuff in there, especially great for SQL Server stuff. So it's great, but make sure you exclude databases because you don't want it trying to like put your databases up in your managed instance, right? So you're just going to basically do your source destination. It's going to copy it all up there. But what I like to do once that's done is then the baseline, I created that baseline at the beginning on SQL Server and I created my managed instance, right? Then I migrate my server level objects with DBA tools, but then I come behind and I run that same script, the baseline that I ran on SQL Server on managed instance. And now I just do a little quick cross check to make sure that my server settings like SP configure stuff made it over to my managed instance. It's just like a little extra step I like to take. Just DBA tools has never done me wrong, wonderful, but I just always like to take one little extra step just to make sure. So I will take another break, see if there's any questions.
All right, folks, let's enter your questions in the live chat. Let us know what are your thoughts. Josephine just covered a lot more information talking about setup configuration, pricing, and the gotchas with the VNet and other during the configuration process, and tips for managed instance. One more quick thing is I am dropping over here on what you were referring earlier, Josephine, for the start-stop feature, which I found that here is still in preview at this point. At least that's what the doc says right now. All right. And let me see if I see any questions. So I just dropped it over there, folks. It's in the live chat. I do not see a question. I did see a comment here from Max earlier on. Hi, Max, and thanks for entering your... There we go. He says, oh man, PowerShell steps need to be supported to simplify here the process, right?
Yeah, I could see. Although, you don't have the VM underneath, right? So that's probably why. Because you're getting a managed SQL, and so that's probably why. You can pull those out and put them in a run book. So that's probably why they did it. Or you can put them in a function. I don't know. There's a bunch of different ways you could do that. I mean, I don't know if Elastic Jobs supports PowerShell either, but that's another option for running stuff, so I just know specifically that I've used runbooks for that. So I think that's what their thinking is.
Awesome. Thank you for the insight there, Josephine.
Of
And
course.
as I mentioned here, folks, as well, hit the link. You can look it up. I'm just going to put it here as well, but it is in the live chat. Any more questions? Remember, use the live chat, your comments, your questions. And for now, it's back to you, Josephine. Thank you.
Okay, great. So I broke this into the third part, right? That we're actually migrating our databases. We got our managed instance set up. It has our server settings, whatever's there. And with the DBA tool, man, that gets everything. Like your links, you've got link servers, you got agent jobs, you got all kinds of stuff. Like it gets all that good stuff, right? Not, like I said, excluding your databases. So now we would set up our database migration service, which is it's kind of between the portal and an Azure Data Studio, right? We would perform online migration. You could do offline or online. And I'm guessing in prod, most people would want online, which, least amount of downtime. And then at the end, I basically, got to put some database configuration settings in it, right? Because our database it's not going to be accessible until we actually migrate over and like bring it online, right? So some very important things with the database migration service. And the first thing I feel like should be like 1,000-point font, because this is a whole project unto its own. And I am on the backs of giants because I have these wonderful people I work with in DevOps who understand VPN. Well, actually, we had ExpressRoute where I was working, so I didn't have to configure any of that. And I will admit that it can be a beast. I tried to set up VPN in my local Azure, and wow, I just didn't have the fortitude, quite frankly, because I already had ExpressRoute at work, and my boss is like, no, we're just going to do it here, so don't worry about it, right? So I'm sure that I have links on the resources slide. If I don't, Microsoft has a bunch of tutorials that can walk you through. So that's very important, because the only way that your managed instance will be able to talk to your SQL Server on-prem is via VPN or ExpressRoute. So some one of those two has to be configured. And if you don't have ExpressRoute at your business, I would say don't get it personally, because that's expensive. So VPN, if you're just doing this as a personal project on the side. So then to get the DMS ready, there's just a simple thing in the Azure portal. You just got to register the data migration set up there. So that's very easy. You got to create a storage account. Again, another one of those easy things. Now, when you take the full backup from on-prem, you have to. I tested it. It doesn't work without checksum. They mean for real with checksum. So you got to do that. So if you already have a backup job that's running and you are like, well, I need to take that backup and restore it over, however you're going to do it, it's got to be with checksum for real. I thought I could get around that. I can't. You can't. So the thing with checksum, though, I know, is that if you put in your agent job or you're going to take a backup, it does make it take longer. So just so you know, it depends on how big your database is. Yeah, then could be substantially longer with the checksum. So then you need to use Azure Data Studio, and you've got to get your Azure SQL Migration extension installed, so that way you can actually manage the migration from Azure Data Studio. It used to all be an Azure portal. And let me tell you, it was actually far, far more complicated up there. So I'm really glad they rewrote it this way. So you just connect to your SQL Server, on-prem SQL Server in Azure Data Studio, and you right-click it. So that's actually your SQL Server, not Managed Instance. This is where your source. And you say Manage. And then it brings you this nice dashboard. So if you had something already in progress, there'd be something listed, migrations here or down lower in the panel here in this dashboard. But in this case, I didn't have anything set up. So, right, I would start with migrate to Azure SQL, right? And then it will step you through. So you're going to have this 7-step process, right? Now it's going to take you through what I told you to do in the first part of this. Not I want to wait till I'm setting up the DMS to that. That's up to you. You could just assess here and look at your results and recommendations, and then, well, you got to cancel out because you're not ready. But I'm a big fan of get the database, the data migration assistant, and do that assessing before. Yeah, it's another little program installed, but I just like to have that done out of the way. I'm ready for DMS. I already know it's not going to find anything, but that's up to you. You could do it here and then cancel out if you find something to go fix it. So that's the first two steps. First two steps are basically what I showed you earlier with that extra tool that, and then step 3 is, you setting up your SQL target, right? So it knows the source mostly because you're coming from it, but in step 5, you're going to do a little bit more configuration with that. So you're setting up the target, like you're saying, I want to go to this managed instance, and here's the information about it, right? And then step 4 is very simple. You pick online or offline. So online just means that, well, you all know if you did log shipping or mirroring, whatever it is, other high availability type, type stuff online, so that you can go to the last second and cut over, right? You're just like barely any downtime. Offline, you might have more downtime. And offline is totally a valid option. If your business will let you do that, I say wholeheartedly yes, because online is a way more stress. I mean, if they say, oh yeah, we could be down for an hour or something, or we can, do great. I mean, don't say no to that, because that's wonderful, way less stressful than trying to do it online. So if you can, great. So that's step 4. Step 5 is there's some more data source configuration. So meaning you need to tell it where your backups are. So let's say you're doing full log, diffs, logs, everything. Now remember, with checksum, so update your jobs so that they actually get with checksum, because it's going to need every single one of those backups that you're going to be restoring to managed instance with checksum, not just the full at the beginning. So make sure you set all that stuff. And your see, I'm guessing you have agent jobs to do your backups, so just make sure you set that stuff. And then that's all in there. It's going to need so it's going to need access to the network location where you're putting your backups. So that's step 6 is also part of making sure that you install the self-hosted integrated runtime thing on your SQL Server itself, like on your VM in your data center, so that it can do all of that communication. That's basically like, think of it as like log shipping. This is basically what it's doing. It's going to take your logs from your network share, is going to over there to your storage account. Remember, because you set up a storage account at the beginning of the section. I know there's like 15 steps here that I say there's 7, but there's like 15 or 20 or whatever. It's going to put it in the storage account from your network share. All your little backups going to stream up there, or big backups, depending on whatever size you have. And then it's going to restore them into the managed instance from the storage account. It's a lot of moving parts and pieces. So you have to install this integration runtime thing on your SQL Server. Then you get a summary of it all naturally. Well, maybe not naturally, but I think that's a great idea to have a summary of everything you're going to do. And then when you get it all set up right and it's happy, then it brings you back to this screen, which is the dashboard now that you were seeing earlier. This was where you say, oh, I want to start one, I want to create one. Now down here on the same dashboard, you can see that we have one in progress, right? So that's the one we just set up. So you can click on this, it'll give you more details. It give you like what backups have restored, where, what's going on in there, see if something's in like this. Just in progress means you haven't actually cut over. So it doesn't mean something's actively restoring necessarily. It just means, hey, this migration is still in progress, right? So you can go in there and you can say, oh, gee, the full is restored, or oh, gee, look at that log is restored, and stuff like that. So that is over here kind of in this. So this is more of that that dashboard, like active backup files. Like you see this one's restored, it'll tell you if something's still restoring and what have you. So then this is like any migration you do. So if you're a DBA and you've migrated SQL Server to SQL servers, these are the rules of migrating, right? You just stop everything you can, because I know sometimes that's hard. Sometimes I've migrated even SQL Server to SQL Server. And I don't even know if we could stop everything because we're not sure in ops what all's hitting it. So you just try to do the best you can. And you take a final log backup with checksum, right? Of course, so we got that with checksum. You verify it's restored. And here's what gets me some, and I have not tested this. I actually had another attendee from another one of my presentations say, maybe you could put in a read-only mode. I did not try that, and that's a good idea. And it might work, or it might not work, but you cannot take your on-prem DB offline. It totally tanks the process. Like, it needs to be able, even though it's going to take the log backup that you did and restore it through the, take it from your network share into the storage account and restore it to your managed instance, it still expects to see your on-prem database online and ready, which is hairy to me. Is kind of concerning because I like to do the final log backup, like a tail log backup with checksum, fine, and then boom, take it offline, right? Because then I know nothing's hitting it. Alas, you can't do that. You may be, like I said, you may be able to do read only. I have not tested that, but that makes me very nervous, very anxious. I want to hurry the cutover along, which I don't like the word hurry and migration in the same sentence because that just makes me feel stressed, like something's going to go long. It's just going to go wrong because we're hurrying. I don't like those words together, but just try to do your cutover as quick as you can after. So it funny enough, I typed all that stuff like legit on the last slide before I even read all of this stuff. So they warn you too. They tell you, hey, stop all that stuff, create a log backup, verify it's been restored, right? And nicely, it does give you this little thing saying, hey, there's this many pending, hit refresh. And then it says, like, this is like, the idiot light on your dashboard, and make sure like, hey, there's nothing more to restore because you want to make sure. I mean, at least that in SQL Server, you don't even have that. When you're going from SQL Server to SQL Server, you just have to, like, based on your knowledge, don't do that. Don't cut over until you're ready, right? But yep. And then you say cut over, right? Complete cut over. And it's cut over, right? It's very quick. It's like, it's very much like, it really so much has the the feel of log shipping. So if you've done log shipping before, it's very much that same feel. Only thing is, like, you can't take your database offline over there in SQL Server till you've done this cutover. When this cutover is done in place, then I'm like back over there and take my database offline, and hopefully nothing got through that, something I missed, right? So did the best we could. That's the way I look at it. And at the end, I verified the migration. This is basically like logging in, see if things are hitting it, the managed instance now, making sure nothing's hitting the old one, checking the error logs and stuff like that to see, like, okay, is something erroring out, that kind of thing at the end to make sure. But also, you want to migrate the database settings. So, you can capture all the database settings for your on-prem ones before. You don't have to do all that at the end. But then I like to make sure that I get them into the database that's now online in Managed Instance, right? This is a big chunk of the work, is the migrating, right? This is it's the long, hard part. The part that might give you a migraine is definitely this part, because you need the VPN or the express route and all these little bits and pieces working in concert, all these steps and dashboards and all kinds of stuff. But man, it's so much easier that since they put it in Azure Data Studio. At first I was like, oh, a little heart palpitations, like, oh boy, what does this mean? But it's actually way, way better now. So I will take a break to see if there's any questions.
Awesome. Some very exciting information here. And folks, if you have a question, remember, use the live chat to enter your questions, your comments, and remember to like and subscribe to the channel so we can keep bringing you some great quality content here. And just a quick refresher, folks. Josephine has been, talking about from DBA tools to online cutover to the migration tips, tricks, and verification, migration, and database settings here. So it's a lot of great just in this part. and she's ready for the next part. Are you ready, Josephine?
I'm ready.
All right.
This is
So
my
it's
favorite part.
there we go. I see that you mentioned before you have I felt that you have overcome the migraine portion as this one came to an end. You click on complete. Yes.
Uh, Every time though I click on complete, I'm like, oh my gosh, what could go wrong? Every migration, I swear, there's a little bit of nerves, no matter how good you got at it, how many times you're like, oh, because everybody's on the line, like waiting for the database stuff to go over so we can like migrate. You're like, oh, God, what could possibly go wrong or right here? It's like,
This is great there. All right, so it's all you now. Thank you.
okay. So I say this, and my husband even questions me. He's like, what? How can you love auditing? And I did have to stop and think for a sec. Do I actually like really love auditing? You know what it is I love when I catch people doing things they're not supposed to, or I feel like they're like looking over their shoulder, like you're not standing behind them because we're all remote, like almost everybody's remote lately, I think. But I mean, I'm lucky enough to be remote, I guess. So you can't possibly see over the shoulder. Even when we were sitting in the office, I swear to God, all together, I feel like they were thinking I was like behind them, because you can find all kinds of things out with auditing. You know, find out all kinds of things that SQL Server's doing behind the scenes. It's absolutely fascinating. So you're like, that person can't be sending that query through. This is just something SQL Server does to support the queries. So I actually have a whole book on auditing, by the way, but put out by A-Press last year. But because I love auditing so much, it's just I just love having the data, like querying it, any reporting on it. Anyway, so that all to tell you that I really think it's very important to configure auditing and alerting. Now, I don't know. I think I might do alerting first, just because someday you need to know, like if you're too much, you have too much CPU usage, or you're running out of storage, or whatever it is. I mean, that's going to kill their server long before any auditing stuff. So, I could flip those around there. And then there's a security check, right? I didn't used to do this. I actually owe this to Tracy Boggiano for turning me on to the CIS benchmark stuff. So we'll take a quick peek at that too. So with Managed Instance, so with SQL Server Audit, it's very similar. It's like if you know how to do SQL Server Audit, then you just got a little tweaks that you got to do, because you have to have a storage account, right? You don't have a VM or like a network share or whatever. You can just store stuff. I take that back, because you can't put SQL Server Audit files in network share. So I just take that all back. You got to put them on the disks on the VM. I tried that network share thing one time. It didn't work. So you don't have a VM. So you have no disks. So you got to put them in a storage account. And then you've got to use a URL for the destination, because you got to put in the storage account with the URL. And then you just have to query that URL to get the data back. So it's pretty straightforward, actually. If you know how to use SQL Server Audit, then you're not in too bad a shape there. It's not so different from, like, if you have Azure SQL Database. Now that's a whole other kind of auditing thing. It's got a similar feel to SQL Server Audit, but you can literally just enable it in the portal. And later this year, I'll be doing a Terraform presentation on how you can do it, because we like at where we do infrastructures, we put all as code, right? So so there's that. But this too, I mean, any number of these things, I'm sure you could code out some way too, but I haven't done Terraform with Managed Instance myself. Anyway, that's a side note. But I love coding things out so it's repeatable. That's my big thing. It's like I've got a whole repository in GitHub, again, my SQL Kitty stuff, that deals with kind of managing SQL Server Audit, and like automating it a bit more, and kind of like putting it across different servers and all that. Anyway, so that's all out there. So like I said, monitoring and alerting, I mean, I'm probably put that before auditing, because you need to know these kinds of things. When things run out of space, you want to know, and you want to have an alert rule, action groups, like all that kind of stuff, so that you don't want somebody coming to you and being like, oh, well, the server's broken. And you're like, oh, oops, yeah, I could have known that if I'd gone and like had an alert on any number of these metrics, right? These are the big three here. So those are the most important ones you want to know about. So then lastly, we have this CIS benchmark. So there's actually another PowerShell module called DBHX, and it needs Pester. And so this here, this is a lot. This is like, again, this code is up in up in a repository of my presentations up there. So you can go look at this and get a feel for it. So, you know, you have to connect to your instance, right? You have to, I just excluded a bunch of checks because a lot of this stuff doesn't apply to managed instance. Honestly, you could just run them all. It's going to go into a CSV file, and then, you know, review them at your leisure, or however leisurely you want to be about some of the stuff you don't want to be leisurely probably so much about. But I didn't actually run it before I mean, how could I know? I didn't know about it, so I couldn't run it, but it actually has a lot of good stuff in there. And so if you just decided, hey, yeah, I want to actually see all this stuff, you know, some of the stuff's just not applicable. So, but heck, you know, if you never run it before, you might as well see the whole capabilities. So I just, like I said, I excluded this stuff just because it get like kind of busy. It's kind of busy if you have a lot of stuff in there that maybe doesn't apply to you. So anyway, run it, see if it works for you. But I just think auditing, yay, auditing, and then alerting, which you absolutely need, and then your security check. So that one feels small because I do a lot less talking on it, but it's still very important. So I might take a little break again, and then we'll wrap up and like summarize everything.
All right, some very exciting information here on monitoring and auditing, talking about including alerting, security checks, lots of tips for the post completion here. And I also saw that there is PowerShell. So, Max, that is for you there. The use of PowerShell, leveraging Pester.
Yeah, I love these modules. These modules that people come like DBA checks, you know, these and DBA tools, they're amazing modules. If you have not used them, like legit, even if you're not going to the cloud, or you could use them in SQL Server. I have not used them in Azure SQL Database so much, but it's not as much applies there, right? But they're amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. I have seen, how can I say, DBA tools. I know quite a few of very enthusiastic users as well of the tool.
Mm-hmm.
So, and as you said, also the PowerShell modules. So I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
through and through. All right, folks, let me take a quick look here regarding the comment section. And remember, like, share, and subscribe. I do not see any question at this point. All right,
Okay,
Josephine, it's all you.
excellent.
Thank you.
I've just like numbed everybody into silence because there's a lot to take in, honestly. It's a whole lot. When I was figuring out this whole process, whew, it's a lot. And there's a lot of good documentation from Microsoft out there too. And then I was like, well, we just need to lump it. Yeah, I just got to have a plan, like really, and then share it with the world, because that's, you know, I just love when people share plans with me. So anyway, the longer story of the slide is that, oh, and Adriano was so nice to me before before, and I was sorry I was like a little bit late. So I was going through fixing my fonts because I don't have PowerPoint on my Mac anymore. And so I have this Libre free office suite thing. So anyway, this one's a little bit like tight and messy for my taste, but it gets the point across to you, which is you prepare, right? Which you're like analyzing, maybe if you're bold, you're cleaning, or you're documenting what you clean later, because you don't want to keep everything. I can't stand keeping all these like little tables that are like named underscore backup, underscore this, underscore. Like a migration feels like a time to cleanse. So either, I mean, if you like to be a little more cautious after the migration, and you're preparing a checklist. So I kept that a little vague, I know, but just kind of like whatever, make it custom to you. Like what all is in your environment? What do you know you need to move? What do you not, you know, maybe what you don't want to move? I mean, just everything. You could document your feelings about it. I don't know. You can like draw a diagram, whatever it is, but have a checklist so that the day of the migration, you don't have this stress trying to remember, oh geez, what was I going to do? Because that's the main thing. You want to have like lower stress on the day of migration. So you're going to set up your cloud database, in this case a managed instance, right? You're going to create a baseline of your on-prem SQL server so you can get that server level stuff over to it when it's ready. mind you, you're going to use DBA tools for the migration part of the server level objects, but I just really love that double check. I don't know. I'm just a big fan of I feel like I need to run a query here somewhere. And so I'm like going to check some of my SP configure stuff just as like, okay, sanity check even. Not, like I said, DBA tools has never done me wrong, never missed anything, but I just like that little extra step for myself. Then we need to migrate the databases to Azure, right? Because now we have a managed instance sitting there just waiting, doing nothing. And so we can do this online migration, you know, mostly through Azure Data Studio. It's very easy now with that whole setup, the stepping through and the dashboard. And then when we're done, now remembering one important thing that I just try hard to forget, VPN or Express, you do need those. So, and I just don't really know how to set them up. Otherwise, I would just tell you, honestly, I would just add it in here for you if I could. Maybe one day I figure it out. So then we verify our migration, right? Which includes getting those database settings. You might have some database scope stuff that you set over the years. Maybe you need it, maybe you don't. I don't know. That's another place with the migration. You have server settings, you have database settings. Do they make sense? I don't know. And you kind of have to figure that out. It's sort of that kind of thing where, you know, sometimes people can't really tell you. You might be able to Google one-off things that you need. Anyway, just know that maybe you don't need those settings anymore. Maybe they served some other purpose. Maybe you still do. But finally, you know, that's definitely not less important is your monitoring and your alerting, right? With your auditing and alerting on all this important stuff like CPU and memory and all that good stuff. So, and your security check, because I probably forget that. I did a SQL Server to SQL Server migration because some of the SQL servers in my last job were just too big. Microsoft even told us, no, don't even put those on a VM in Azure because they're just, no, it's just too big. Just leave them on-prem for now and figure out how you could pick it apart maybe at some point. Anyways, so we left those alone. Thing is that I forgot to put auditing on it for like 2 weeks because it was like a Saturday in the summer and it was, I didn't have the air conditioning on and I don't even know. It was like 90 in my house and who knows what happened. I think my brain melted partially. We were on the phone for like 6 hours and then like 2 weeks, I was like, oh crap, I forgot to put auditing on. So even I'm not completely innocent. I forget parts, even though it was in the list. It was in the migration checklist, but it was at the bottom. After the migration, I closed the page and I was like, okay, we're done. And I was like, dang it, we're not done. So anyway, I had to add 100%. I didn't add this. I have a slide deck I found online. I have a thank you slide to the people who created it. 100% total success, hopefully. Anyway, but I just like that on the slide. So anyway, basically, if you want the whole picture, right? If you feel like, oh, that's great overview and they got some scripts in the GitHub from me and that's good enough for you, all the power to you. If you really want some more help, my co-author, I think she's still the mentor on this projects out there. So you literally can get these projects at Manning and they take you through literally step by step by step by step, like I couldn't even do here. It would take hours. And I wrote it all out very carefully, tested it all carefully. We had people testing it and it's pretty rock solid. And so she's actually there, I think, to still mentor. So you could actually talk to someone if you have questions about the projects too. So that might be something you'd be interested in. Anyway, they usually have sales periodically. I don't even remember how much it costs, but it could be worth it if you have to actually do this for work and work is expecting you to do it. Maybe work can pay for the course too. I don't know. So, hey, I don't get a lot of money from it. I'm just trying to do what helps you. So, and always feel free to hit me up with questions. I'm always happy to answer them. This is my resources slide. So you've got the series, the repository, some other stuff about features, and there's different SQL Server audit presentations and codes and the different PowerShell modules. And the credits to the people who created the slide deck, because for some reason I was really in love with having arrows, because you know you're migrating and you're like going that way. So it had to have arrows, so that's what they did. And I loved all their little pictures with like light bulbs and everything. So anyway, like I said, please feel free to hit me up if you have questions after this, something you think of. I'm on Twitter, Hello SQL Kitty, and you could email me. And I blog regularly as SQL Kitty too. So whatever I'm doing, it's like the flavor of the week, like whatever tech thing I'm working on, it just goes on the blog. Oh, and thank you
Awesome.
for having me, Adriano. Thank you. We were joking before this that some of the scheduling fell through on your side, my side, and then I thought, oh my gosh, we're gonna do this one day, and this is today. We did it.
Absolutely, yes. And very, I can tell you this, I learned a lot there. And I hope that everyone attending as well, and as well as those who will be watching, will also be enjoying it, coming back and reviewing it, the video, because there is, as you said, it is dense, a lot of great information.
I
What a
try to like break it down into simple as possible. And honestly, yeah, I get to the end, I'm like, wow, I wonder if somebody could like really follow all that and like just use this to get through. And I'm like, wow, I want to hear from that person because I'm not sure if I started from beginning scratch, whatever, if I could get through with my own presentation. It's like, yikes, it's a lot of information.
Uh, I believe it sounds to me that this presentation becomes kind of a reference point. The reference you made with uh, with the Manning project, is where someone goes to get more details. Look at your GitHub, and that
Mhm.
it's a good starting point for someone. The
Right.
presentation.
There's some bits and pieces. I was mainly that I thought I don't want people to have to just try to piece all this together on their own when I could just share some of this out to the world and hopefully it, helps at least like one person. Oh, there's Mango. He's got to say bye. One person gets through this a little bit better. Okay, yeah, it's almost over. It's almost over, Mango. He's like, when is my dinner time?
All right.
Okay.
Yes, I do have a question here. Thank you, Riz,
Okay.
for making the
Okay.
question.
Excellent.
How do we health check? Oh, I should post the question. Apologies here. I need 2 seconds. So we have a question, and I need 2 seconds so I can post that question for you. All right. So here's the question: How do we do health checks on an on-prem database or cloud database? He says it
Okay.
is, as we know, it's out of topic, right? But for a
No,
learner
that's okay.
perspective, any
That's okay.
points or insights on that?
Oh yeah, no, that's fine. I'm happy to answer off topic. Yeah, so at my old company, we actually had Idera, diagnostic manager, and I know that that can get cloud database as well. So if you're looking for a paid tool, I think Redgate also has things like that, or it's like Apex SQL. There's a whole bunch of different tool if you're looking to not have to do a lot of configuration yourself. Like there's any number of ways you could just monitor SQL Server yourself, or like managed instance. Not really sure how like do it yourself you could do Azure SQL database, but since I wasn't really covering that so much, I won't speak so much to that. But in the portal, like in Azure portal, you could do a lot of that monitoring, like with Azure SQL database. There's a lot you can do in there. I don't think you would probably not need a third party tool for that. But even with managed instance or VMs in Azure, there's certainly like, you've got Azure Monitor and all that good stuff, diagnostic settings up there that you can actually set yourself. So if your company isn't excited to pay for a third party tool, I will say though that if you're not excited about doing a lot of configuration, SolarWinds is another one. In fact, SolarWinds is really good at figuring out performance problems. We had a really bad performance problem on Postgres, as it turns out, in my old job. And we that got a lot of good information from those. So they can also help you with the performance stuff, because that stuff wasn't in the cloud, by the way. I'm mentioning that stuff. So yeah, I mean, you're kind of either configuring if you're in the cloud or on-prem. If you want to try to roll it yourself, in the cloud it's easier to roll it, you like do it yourself because you have Azure Monitor, you've got all this settings that you can actually monitor. But it's SQL Server on-prem, it's a lot harder to roll your own monitoring solution. I've seen people do it, but it's a lot harder.
And I believe there are back to there are some PowerShell scripts I
Oh,
have seen
okay.
some people telling me about. I myself I haven't used that, but I do recall someone telling me, "Hey, yeah, I run some PowerShell to retrieve some data," and I'm like, "That's
Hmm.
interesting too."
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. I mean, hey, I actually have a DBA friend who was doing this he's got a whole monitoring solution that he created because his company wouldn't let him buy any third-party monitoring tools. I told him, like, dude, you should roll that stuff out to the world. Oh, people want to see that stuff because it seems like really super solid. I haven't talked him into it yet. He's not opposed to putting it out. He's just like, I don't know how to organize it to get it out there. So we'll see if I can talk him into it.
there we go. Yeah, make a contribution. Make it open source. You want to
Right,
go,
right.
and
I know. I
review the
was saying,
licensing and see which one you want to put.
right. Yeah, yeah, I was saying to him I could probably help him roll it out there too. Like, we could get together on it so that we could, work in concert maybe. I give him the credit for building it all, of course, because it's all his, but just try to help roll it out to GitHub or whatever. But we'll see, we'll see. I'm gonna talk to him. Like, I just forgot about that until just now, so I might be hitting him up again.
There we go. All right. So let me take a final look here. And yep, that's it. We got Reese says, well, thanks a lot for the
Okay. Oh,
feedback there, your answer. And folks, and talking about thanks, again, like to
mhm.
thank you a lot, Josephine, for
Oh, yeah.
making the time to be here with us, sharing this great knowledge, the experience, an unimaginable amount of headache you can save someone.
Yes, hopefully,
Let me tell you.
hopefully, I save like just one person headache. Yes. Thank you so much again for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Just stand by there for a few, and I'll get
Okay.
back to you here in 1 second.
All right. Thank
All
you.
right, folks. Thank you all very much. Remember to join us, like, subscribe, and share the video. And we'll get back to you soon, next month, with another presentation. Thank you all.